This time of year, MBA hopefuls are chomping at the bit to try their hand at admission to the most selective MBA programs. And when we speak, they often talk about the MBA essays. How do I build strong essays for my dream school? How do I make my candidacy stand out? The strongest MBA candidates know that it's critical to stand out in the MBA admissions race. They understand that statistics alone are merely table stakes. Your statistics, such as GMAT or GRE, GPA, and years of work experience, help you pass the evaluation stage of the MBA admissions process. But that's only the first hurdle. You also need to pass the selection stage. From within the pretty large pool of MBA candidates who all qualify for admission, that can often be as many as half of all applicants, even to the most selective MBA programs, you need to be someone they actually want to invite to the class. So it's understandable that you want to make sure you're coming up with very strong and compelling answers to the MBA essay questions and the MBA application questions in general. You want to stay on point. One of the most common criticisms of admissions reviewers is that this candidate missed answering the question. But it's also absolutely critical that you stand out. And in order to do this, there's a part of the MBA application strategy that comes before you begin writing your essays, a step that will position you to much better craft every component of your MBA application, not just the MBA essay answers. And that step is what I want to talk about. But why is it important to talk about this? Seeing my MBA candidates triumphantly joyful when they receive admission to their dream school never gets old. This last round of admissions, when the top schools started to release decisions and I started getting calls and texts from overjoyed admits, I too was filled with pride and joy. The reason I do what I do is that no one should feel their MBA dream is impossible to reach. MBA admission is what I know best and love most. I founded my MBA admissions consulting firm, My MBA Path, because I want to liberally and generously share my MBA admissions knowledge with as many candidates as I can possibly reach. And I know that one thing that really helps you when you start your MBA application journey is hearing stories of other candidates. I know that you get inspired by the success of those who came before you, that you get encouraged when you hear how others overcame weak spots in their MBA application. And let me tell you, every candidate has both strong and weak spots. No one is ever perfect, and you don't need to be perfect in order to get admitted. So today, I want to share with you 2 case studies that take you behind the scenes of how compelling MBA stories are built. Let's dig in. I've already talked at length about the importance of soul searching, using deep, essential questions that get to the heart of your values, your motivations, your why. These questions about the choices you've made and the ways in which you have accomplished things will help define who you are. They will guide the narrative about the way you show up in all the places in your work and life, in all the communities that you're part of. From the questions you ask yourself as you begin your application and the answers to these questions, 4 essential stories will emerge. These are fundamental stories every candidate applying to a top business school will need to identify for themselves. These 4 stories are narratives about leadership, accomplishment, challenge, and growth. Let's take a look at how this framework fits into the admissions criteria of top MBA programs. MBA programs will tell you plainly and clearly who they are looking for. 2 such examples are the Stanford GSB and Harvard Business School. One of the most insightful descriptions of what kinds of students Stanford's admissions team seeks can be found in this description coming directly from the website. We seek the most promising students in terms of intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, and personal qualities and contributions. And they also tell you where they will be looking for evidence of these qualities. your background, experiences, perspectives, aspirations, values, and your accomplishments. It's all very clearly defined for you, but that doesn't make it easy. How do you demonstrate intellectual vitality? What do you think is a sign of it? If you think that it equates a 780 GMAT, I'm afraid you're wrong. While a very strong GMAT test score is certainly an asset and even a necessity for most MBA hopefuls who are applying to the GSB, intellectual vitality is a much more complex notion. Now, the Stanford admissions officers helpfully tell you how they define intellectual vitality. They tell you that they're seeking new knowledge or expertise, your willingness to test and challenge assumptions, and your ability to develop new ideas or perspectives. But how does this work in practice? Let me walk you through an example from the success story of one MBA candidate. First, a little bit about their background. This candidate was a software engineer. Now, that is a really common professional background when it comes to the vast pool of those seeking admission to the most selective MBA programs. You can say that this is an overrepresented background. This particular candidate worked for a fairly large fashion startup. The challenge was how to frame this candidate's work experience in a way that demonstrates the qualities the GSB is looking for. How should she go about demonstrating intellectual vitality in particular? And here's how the solution emerged. We spent a lot of time talking. We dug into how this candidate did her work. We looked at some of the most challenging tasks she had tackled in her career. And we specifically looked deeply into how she made decisions and how she helped her team move forward when they hit obstacles. And in our analysis of her work, we sought to uncover some patterns in the way she achieved results. So, what did we discover? We discovered that we can use her work on conceptualizing, developing, and launching complex technological solutions as evidence. One such example was the work she did on conceiving a novel sourcing system that significantly upgraded the company's operations model. You could say it overhauled fulfillment, a critical part of the company's operations. So, in her MBA story, this candidate talked about how she approached this challenging task as an intellectual puzzle. She included details about what her philosophy in approaching a new business challenge was. She described how she focused on the learnings that were needed at the onset of such projects and how she used them to generate new ideas and ensure buy-in from the team. The key here was to go far beyond presenting this accomplishment as a technical task and adding the nuances that helped others see it as an intellectual endeavor that resulted in a technological advancement. Next, let's take a look at what the HBS Admissions Committee is looking for. Just like the Stanford GSB, they're very clear and precise regarding what kind of students they're seeking for the Harvard MBA class. Ones with habit of leadership, analytical appetite and aptitude, and engaged community citizenship. Leadership is frequently one of the hardest parts for MBA candidates to demonstrate. They fear that they have not been in positions of managing anyone, or that their examples are not impressive enough. But Harvard tells you very directly that there's no one size fits all. They appreciate leadership on any scale, from organizing a classroom to directing a combat squad, from running an independent business to spearheading initiatives at work. In essence, we're looking for evidence of your potential, is what they tell you. Now, one successful HBS admit I worked with used an example of how she leveraged the intersection of knowing just enough about technology, human behavior, and business processes to catch the attention of the head of risk management at the financial institution she was working for. Without having deep expertise in any of these areas, her ability to translate and serve as a bridge between technology and people earned her an assignment as the lead of a project to overhaul the new associates onboarding process. It was a perfect example of leadership, and it would have served as a fine example of intellectual vitality, too, for that matter. It was made even more valuable because she didn't have the title and managerial power. She had to influence rather than manage. Now, I want you to pause and think. If there's one takeaway I want you to absolutely have from these two stories, it's that they're not about exceptional accomplishment. They're way more about how and why these MBA candidates did what they did than about some extraordinary project or heroic achievement. Now, how can you use what you just learned to start curating the building blocks of your 4 MBA stories? How can you use this framework and the examples that I just shared with you and let them serve as your primer for creating your own MBA success? What narratives of leadership, accomplishment, challenge, and growth can you uncover in your own background? If you're committed to making this year the year you get admitted to a top MBA program, use the concept of the 4 essential stories to get there faster and easier.